Hello, and welcome back to the Scary Stories channel. Thank you for watching our haunted prison story. We appreciate your interest in our channel. If you like what you see, be sure to like and subscribe. Tonight, we have a special surprise in store for you. We are diving into the realms of a haunted prison. Now, let's begin. I started working for the Department of Corrections a few years ago. It was an old convent that the state converted into a prison. Built in the early 1900s on a hill outside of town stood this chapel, surrounded by modern prison housing units and razor wire. It was a real-life oxymoron. It reminded me of a place where heaven and hell met under the same roof. It was my first day, and the captain was taking me on my first tour. I remember thinking that for a prison, this was really nice. It wasn't at all what I had stereotyped in my own mind. The chapel was breathtaking. It was so quiet and peaceful. We were then off to see the housing units that I would be working in. The captain introduced me to all of the officers. Then he took me back to the admin area to finish up the training and orientation. I finished for the day, was given my post assignments, and headed out. The next day, I reported to my post. There was another officer there to train me. He was an older gentleman and had been with the department for over 10 years. Needless to say, he knew his job well. I was glad he was chosen to train me. The week passed quickly, and I was almost ready to take over the unit by myself. All week, that officer was upbeat, caring, and easygoing. The mood changed on the last day of training, though. He said, "Come with me to the sergeant's office. We need to talk before you are here by yourself." He said, "Son, this is a good job, and the guys here are very respectful. The job here comes with some unseen responsibility that you should know about." He told me that things at night are completely different than during the day. I don't know how to tell you this, so I'll just come right out and say it. The place is haunted. I laughed to myself. He said, "You can think I'm just a senile old man trying to scare you off if you want. Truth is, though, I'm trying to prepare you. Don't be scared, just be aware. If you can't handle it, so be it. You were looking for a job when you found this one, right?" He walked out of the office at this point. Was he serious? I just figured he was trying to scare the new guy as some sort of initiation. I left for the weekend. I returned on Monday evening. I went to my post and started the paperwork for the day. Everything went as planned. That night before lights out, there was a count. I walked the unit with my backup officer, called in the total, and then waited for it to clear. The strange thing is, an announcement came over the radio to recount. We did. I called it in again, sat down, and waited. After about 5 minutes had passed, a sergeant and the shift captain came into my unit. Something was wrong. Now there were 4 of us. The captain said, "Come on, kid, one more time with us." And so I did. We all got the same number, so I figured everything was fine now. The sergeant rolled his eyes and said, "Here we go again." What was that all about? The captain pulled me out in the hallway to speak privately with me. He said that this happens all the time, and he might as well break me in right. I asked, "What are you talking about?" He said there is supposed to be 52 here, and we all keep getting 53. I asked if there was someone here from another unit. He said, "No, the whole camp is +1, and it's your floor. This happens on occasion on this floor. Have you heard of the ghost of Forehouse yet?" I said, "No." "Well, you just met him. Let's go back and try this one more time. I bet we count 1 less this time around." Sure enough, he was right. I was so confused. The announcement came through that count was clear. They all left, but not before the captain winked at me. What is going on here? One of the occupants came up to me a few minutes later. He asked me if I believed in the paranormal. I knew where this was going. I was a skeptic, but everyone seemed to be all believers on this floor. I hadn't dismissed the fact that everyone was in on this to scare me, but I will admit this was strange. The next month went by, and I was really settling into the new job. I knew everyone now and felt more comfortable with the routine. I looked at the clock. It was about count time, and then I would go home. The announcement came. We made it down one row and was on to the second. One of the offenders looked scared and his eyes were wide as could be. I looked around to see if there was an issue, but nothing seemed out of place, so I continued. I had planned on going back when count cleared to see if anything was wrong. I didn't even get to the end of the row when I realized I was already off by one, according to my paperwork. I looked it over for a second and realized the guy that looked scared didn't have a bunk partner. The problem is, there was somebody standing behind him when I went through. Before I got a chance to investigate, I got a call from Control Center on my radio saying there was somebody running out of the bay. I looked all around. I didn't see anything. I didn't hear running footsteps. They told me to come back to the common area. He was standing right there. I walked over to the other part of the bay. Nobody was there. Again, on the radio, he is standing right in front of you. There was nobody there. The cameras were seeing things that I couldn't see. Just about then, 5 officers and 2 sergeants, followed by the captain, all came in. The camera in Control Center was seeing the man, but none of us could. Finally, as soon as the, quote, mystery man came into view, he was gone. He just faded away on the cameras. The captain said, "You having fun yet, kid?" with a smirk. This wasn't funny. I said I wasn't so sure. "Well, get used to it," he replied, as he silently laughed. We recounted and it cleared. I was ready to go home now, and it was time. The next day I learned that the gentleman that looked scared the night before had put in a request to change camps, and a request for protective custody. This meant that he was going to solitary. He asked for it was the strange thing. I had to take some of his property up to the other building where they moved him, and asked him, why would he ask for such a thing? He said, "I'm tired of that freaking 4-house ghost, man. Up here I'm safe long enough until I get transferred." I asked him if he was serious. "Hell yeah, I am." "You see it too, but you choose to ignore it, sir." He was right. I started asking the other officers what's the story or legend behind the 4-house ghost. Come to find out, every officer that had ever worked 4-house had stories to tell. All of them were convinced 4-house was haunted. To be honest, now I did too. There was no explaining it. One officer said that it even caused a lockdown one night for 3 hours. This was when the place first opened. They thought someone had broke into the prison. Why would somebody do that? Come to find out, there was more than just one haunting there. Another officer said that all the time in the unit beside the chapel, there's a nun that appears. It's usually when the new arrivals get to camp. Up until now, I had only heard the offenders talking about this. Now it seemed validated that an officer had seen her as well. Nevertheless, this place had many unexplainable stories. I ended up getting a much better job offer and transferring before I was able to get any answers to what was causing all of this phenomenon. The one thing I can say, though, is that I was changed forever by a prison. I went in as a diehard skeptic and came out a believer in the paranormal. I've always wanted to go back there. There was something about that place that drew me in. Whether that was paranormal or not, I will never know. Have you ever thought about where you will end up when your time on Earth here is done? Heaven? Hell? The place where you died? A prison? Perhaps an abandoned building? These are all good questions to ponder as you are trying to go to sleep tonight. So as always, good night, sleep tight, from the Scary Stories channel.